Right, away we go. No surprises this time.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Coptic Center and our Independence Week Sunday evening experience. Second go around here as we gather in light, love, universal truth, and our ongoing quest towards self-mastery tonight. It's also an evening of having our egos check in the door as we step into our virtual Coptic home tonight. And Coptic board member Steve Krejcik joins us. He's a minister, teacher, and healer, and he's the founder of the Grey Wolf Healing Therapies. Steve has helped thousands clear emotional and energetic roadblocks using the techniques of the Quiro shamans of Peru. And he has published numerous articles on self-improvement and spiritual growth. Steve believes also that one's highest goal in life is to know yourself, and what we measure our spiritual progress by the inner peace and joy and love that we feel and express. Steve's topic tonight is transcending the ego as we keep our ego checked in the door.
So this is a really exciting subject that I'm talking about. I really love this subject, and I've been working on this all my life. And I think, so I've, read a lot of different things, and I'd love to share some of these ideas with you today about the ego. And I'd love to start out with the saying that says, the ego makes a wonderful servant, but the ego also makes a terrible master. So when we live stuck in the ego, our life is not going to be that great, right? So anyway, before we start, let's just everyone think about something that you have in your life, some problem. Is it somebody at work? Is it somebody partner makes you angry about something they do, or maybe it's just something that happens and you just shut down. You're not necessarily going to feel bad about it, but maybe just something that you just don't want to address. Or it might be something about, there's a wonderful polarity going on in the politics today that, does that get your goat? So just take a moment and think about it. If you want to write something down, good, but just think about something that is a problem for you today that you would rather not have. All right. And I'll leave we can leave the mics off. You can just unmute yourself if you have any questions while I'm talking. This is kind of, I like the interactive thing. So, okay. So does everybody have something that they would like to change in their lives? Or something they'd like to improve? Yes? Okay, so let's talk about that. So the reason I called this talk the Transcending the Ego is because that's really what we're doing. So to transcend means to be or go beyond the range or limits of. Okay, so in other words, the ego is not something you can fight. You cannot crush it. You can't get rid of it. It's not there. And we can never solve all of the problems that are created by the ego. If you take the approach in your life of saying, okay, I've got all these problems and I'm going to go to a therapist and just work on each problem one after another, you'll never get there. It's an endless, bottomless pit of stuff. So we're not here to solve the problems created by the ego, but today we're here to learn how to transcend the ego, to go beyond the ego. So how do we do that? We do that by understanding how it works within each of us, and then by choosing something different, which we'll talk about. Okay, so, Hamid Bey talks a lot about there requires a level of intelligence to realize, a state of happiness and enlightenment. And that intelligence is, I don't think it's necessarily being able to have an IQ of 180 and to be able to, to spout out calculus formulas in your head. I think it's more of just an intelligence of being aware of who we are and what's going on in our head. So first off, I think the biggest thing that we have to consider is that the ego is not the problem. A lot of people say, oh, that damn ego, that's everything. If we didn't have the ego, we'd be fine. But it's not the problem. The ego is not the problem. Identifying with the ego is the problem that we have. So in other words, we're allowing that ego, our ego, to be our master. And we're not stepping outside of that space, or we're not transcending the ego. So that's really an important point. The ego is not the problem. Identifying with the ego is the problem. Okay, so next I'd like to quote from one of my favorite Course in Miracles. This is number 69. My grievances hide the light of the world in me. And this is one of my favorites. And so I'm just going to read this now. Laura, you may have heard this once or twice before, right? My grievances show me what is not there and hide from me what I would see. Recognizing this, what do I want my grievances for? They keep me in darkness and hide the light. Grievances and light cannot go together, but light and vision must be joined for me to see. To see, I must lay grievances aside. I want to see, and this will be the means by which I will succeed. No one can look upon what your grievances conceal, because your grievances are hiding the light of the world in you. Everyone stands in darkness, and you beside him. But as the veil of your grievances is lifted, you are released with him. Share your salvation now with him who stood beside you when you were in hell. He is your brother in the light of the world that saves you both. So, to summarize that in my own words, is my joy is covered up by my grievances, and my grievances are in the form of blame, shame, guilt, or pity. And, so also it says to share your salvation with him who stood beside you when you were in hell. In other words, share your salvation with the one who you like the least. Easier said than done. So heaven, as we actually talked about this last Thursday, is within each of us. And it's like this brilliant sun waiting to shine. But it's our thoughts and our beliefs that cover up this sun, and it covers them up with clouds of doubt, blame, and really what many call these clouds as the ego. Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body. Jesus called it sin. And this is all basically, it's a collection of erroneous thoughts and beliefs that we came to believe as true. So here we are growing up as kids, our brains aren't fully developed, and we're facing situations. Maybe our parents weren't there when we needed them. Maybe our brothers and sisters were teasing us. And so we learned a certain behavior. So like, for example, whenever your father got really angry, everybody scattered like mice, right? All the kids were like, oh my God, get out of here. So what did that do? That taught us that anger is a way of power, when actually in reality, anger is not power. So what we've done is in our mind, in our ego, we've convinced ourselves that these thoughts are good for us and this behavior is good for us, and that they're going to help us in some way. So like that, what Claudia read with Hamid Bey, I thought was great, where he asks a person about their ego, and they said, if I got rid of my ego, what would I have? There would be nothing there. And that's where we want to go. We want to go to that nothingness. Buddha called it the darkness. I think he also called it the nothingness. It's when that chattering mind inside of you, that blah, 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 oh, do this, do that. Oh, you're not good enough. Oh, you shouldn't have said that. When that chattering stops, that's when there's nothing there. And that's when we then can experience our divinity. That's when we can find our peace and our joy. So that is exactly what you need to do. But how do you do that, right? How do you get to that point where you can let go of that stuff? So first of all, what we need to do is we need to learn about our ego and learn about the difference between our ego. because basically the ego is a mental filter that is distorting our view of reality. And we call it right, we call that right. I am right, they are wrong, and I am going to tell them. That's all the ego just saying that, because everybody has their own reality. Everybody is right in their own way, and everybody's wrong in their own way. So these filters, these that are distorting our view of reality of the world, they serve the ego. So in other words, if we're suffering, it doesn't come from reality. Suffering comes from the stories that we make up about reality. So if you break your arm, it's going to hurt. But the suffering will be even worse when you make up a story about this. Oh my God, if I do something, I'm going to break it again, or I can't go to work, and all this other turmoil that we create. So again, the ego is not the problem, as many people believe, but identifying with the ego is the problem. So how do we do that? Okay, what does that mean, identify with the ego? So if that is the case, what do we do if we don't identify with the ego? That's all we have, right? But in reality, we have two parts. There's two parts of our brain. There's the part which is the ego, which thinks, which talks, and then there's the other part of the brain, which is the silent observer, the still small voice within, that part of us, that's that peaceful part of us. So let's just talk a little bit about the ego. So the ego is what is like form identity. That's the part of us that's stuck. It's stuck in this world. It's stuck in the 3D world of our five senses. It's the part of us that associates with the material world. In other words, if I don't get a job really quick, won't have money. I won't be able to eat. Sounds good. All this nice spiritual talk is great, but you got to eat, Jack, right? What's this about this? So that's the ego. The ego is always looking outside of ourselves for our happiness. And so as we go through these, think about that issue that you wanted to work on. Think about that and see if any of these apply to it, okay? So in this issue that you're working on, are you trying to look outside of yourself for your happiness, right? Maybe you came to this talk today hoping to find your happiness. And the news is I cannot help you with that. But what I can do is I can show you the street sign that points in that direction, and then you have to take the walk on your own. You have to walk the walk and do it yourself. Do you blame others for your situation that you're looking at? Did you say, this problem because they're such a jerk, that's why I've got the problem? Are you blaming others? It's the ego. Are you blaming an external circumstance for your situation? If only we didn't have that damn Trump as president, the world would be a whole lot better off. Are you blaming others? That's the ego. Are you always looking to the future for happiness? In other words, things will be better when I get that job, I'm going to be better. If I find that partner that I've been looking for, the world is going to be better. The ego justifies the means. In other words, I'm trying to help people to get peace, but I can cheat, lie, and steal to get there. But as long as in the end, I help people, or I'm trying to get that job and I'm going to lie, just a little white lie on the resume so that I can get the job. In other words, the outcome is more important than the means, the journey. And then finally, if it's the ego, you're not enjoying the doing of things. In other words, maybe you're not all that happy with life, with your situation. Oh my gosh, I got this, I got that, life is just got a lot of problems for me right now. These are all things coming from ego identity. These are things that are coming because you are identifying with your ego, okay? So now let's talk about that other part of ourself. Jesus talked about, he said, I have one foot in this world and one foot in heaven. So I believe that means that he was perfectly aware of his ego, but he was also aware of this conscious identity. And so let's talk a bit about what the conscious identity is. So the conscious identity, it transcends the ego. It's beyond the ego. You know, like we talked about the map, the hierarchy of consciousness by David Hawkins. Thank you. By David Hawkins. You know, as you move up that level of consciousness, below 200 is the ego, above 200 is the conscious identity. It's that eternal part of us that only knows peace and joy. Okay? So, what does that mean? First of all, here's some traits that go with that. You're going to find it only within. You're not going to find it from Steve talking about it. You're not going to find it from reading a book. You're going to find it within by going within and finding it there. Another part of it is it's fully accountable for one's life. So in other words, everything comes from within you. If you're upset about something somebody did, you take accountability saying, hey, I'm upset and I take responsibility for being upset. It's not what they did that made me upset. It's my interpretation of that which is making me upset. The other part of the conscious identity never changes. It lives in the now. In other words, it's not planning for the future or worrying about the past or worrying about the future. It's just saying, what am I doing right now? Every moment is a meditation for the conscious identity. And it does enjoy the doing of things. In other words, the simple things that you do in life are enjoyable. It's not like, oh, I hate to go out and pick up the damn dog dirt. You know, it's such a smelly job. You know, it's every part of life is a meditation, and no part is bigger or less for this. And finally, there's no expectations, and you're not tied to an outcome. You're enjoying the journey, and whatever happens, happens. So at this point, I'd like to just take a break for a moment and see if anybody has any questions or thoughts about what I've been talking about. If anybody here, unmute yourself.
I do.
Sure, go for
it. My mother had her master's degree in education, and I also have a bachelor's in education and communication arts. She did her master's thesis on the difference between the intelligence quotient and emotional intelligence, which is also emotional maturity. And she, did all the statistical analysis on that. And it's so true. Your biological age is not necessarily what your emotional age is, as we can see in society. And
yeah.
I had a dear friend of mine make her transition on Friday, and her daughter kept saying, let go of your ego for 4 whole days. She had decided to stop dialysis because of her heart. It was just like, she'd rather go. But it took 4 days for her to let go of her ego. And I want you to know, her daughter told me exactly how it happened. She described the letting go of the ego. Her mother and she and the nurse observed her mother's last breath, and then the power went out in the whole hospital. And they saw a flash of light. While the power was off, the television goes on. And she never watched the television at all when she was laying there for months. And there was static on the screen, like she was communicating with her daughter, and she probably did send a message that, of course, is personal. And she didn't share that. And then the TV went off. And then the power went off for the next 4 city blocks. That's the power that our soul has. Praise God.
Yeah. Yes. Great. Good. So, so what we've talked about so far, has it helped you to address your issue or your concern that you're working on? Let me say, do you feel, we've all been on the planet for a few years now. Do you feel there's a part of you that hasn't changed? Like you still feel like you're 20, or a certain aspect of you still feel like you're 12? Do you feel a part of you like that? That is the part that never changes. That is the part to think about, to nurture, because the ego, that higher self part of ourself never changes. So that part of inside of us, that it's almost like an innocence, right? So you probably be at some point when you were a kid, and like why Jesus said, be like the little children. So come back and nurture that innocence that's within you, because we grow up and our parents and society beat it out of us. Don't be innocent, be sarcastic. If you're innocent, people call you naive. And that's not true. There's two very different things. Naivety is blind innocence, but you can be innocent and be very aware of what's going on. So like a child might be naive and innocent, right? But as an adult, we can learn to become innocent and knowledgeable or wise. So in other words, our innocence comes from our wisdom of our life. Make sense? So that's one avenue to enter, to connect with that. Okay, so anything else for anybody?
That's interesting that you brought that up, because as a child, I was brought up out in the country, and my parents were outside all the time. And my grandparents were all out there people. And so just today, actually, I was outdoors working with the pond pump. And I was so grateful to be outside with my problem of the pond pump, and I was glad I was outside, because that's how I connect. I connect to the animals. I connect to the dirt. I played in the mud all the time when I was a kid. And so thank you for the reminder. Even though I do it automatically all the time, getting that reminder and remembering to go outside and get in nature. Sometimes I get too busy and I don't do that.
Yeah.
When I had a dog, I had to take him out every day. And I'm like, I need another dog.
I tell the cat that all the time. It doesn't work. But that's really such a good point, that it's up to us to find that innocence, to find that, maybe it's something as silly as going out and buying a color book and coloring with colored pencils or crayons or something. Whatever it is for you, for Claudia, it's being outside because that was her childhood anchor. So find that.
While Steve is tied up right now, I want to say I must have misinterpreted the word ego all my life, because, I'm a little conflicted here, because they say if you recognize in somebody else a trait, then you have it in yourself. Well, I don't know if I necessarily believe that, but I can sure recognize people that are all puffed up and they think they're the world's greatest teacher, preacher, healer. I don't think of myself that way, but my definition of ego would be somebody that's all puffed up and they think they're really hot stuff.
I think that's what most people think of when they hear the word ego. My personal definition is that it's nothing more than your sense of self, your separateness from everything else.
Yep.
I think of ego as personality.
Mm-hmm.
I think ego is all about motive. What are we?
I guess maybe that's what I'm trying to say too.
What are we here for as spiritual leaders, or parents, or friends? How can we help somebody else? How can we focus on somebody else to make their lives better? It may be as simple as a compliment. Always finding a way to compliment somebody. And if we emphasize this, it's about all other people except us.
And I would say
The
ego
ego
is about the person that doesn't think about other people. They think about themselves and how well they're coming off to other people. And they want other people to look at me and aren't I great?
Ego is I, and motive with altruism is about others. So we can say that it's no coincidence when we meet somebody, have an opportunity, or go to a restaurant, and the waitress comes in. I'm guilty. I compliment every waiter and waitress I ever eat at. Why? They don't get enough compliments. And they will remember this. So that word motive, I have to say, in my opinion, that is what overcoming ego is. Then we're not thinking about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And we need to be having a balance of a good self-esteem or ego, if you want to equate those, and service to others. I agree.
Hey, Steve, you're back.
I'm back.
Should we turn the meeting back over to Steve?
Yeah, I think a cow must have stepped on the internet line or something out here in the country, you know. So,
I like that.
so you know, and those are all good, common definitions of the ego, and they're all right. You know, everything is right there. But what I'm talking about is that thinking mind. Okay, so I'm talking about how many people, when you go to meditate, have a hard time with getting the mind to stop, where it's just like, well, don't forget to do this. I forgot to do that. I shouldn't have said that, right? How many people on this call have that, right? I do.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
That is what I'm talking about, the ego. You know, Alan said your sense of self. That's a good one, Alan. And hey, John. That is what I'm talking about, the ego, how to silence that mind chatter, which is constantly playing along in your mind, telling you, you should do this, you should do that. They did that. You know, that person is wrong and I'm right. That person did this. You know, that person has a big ego. That's ego in itself. To make that statement is ego. That is what I'm talking about, that mind chatter that's inside that never stops. So how do we stop that chatter, right? How do we stop it? And remember what I said, the ego, that mind chatter, is not the problem. It's identifying with that mind chatter, which is the problem, okay? So you're thinking that that mind chatter is you, and it's not. The mind chatter is just a collection of thoughts and beliefs that you have built through the years that your subconscious mind and your conscious mind has taught you that you need to do this to survive. This is how you survive. You know, I'm a Capricorn, right? So I have to plan everything out. I can't survive. You know, I have 5 pages of notes here. If I don't have 5 pages of notes, I can't go and talk to somebody because it's not organized. I haven't even really looked at them yet. You know, so that is the ego. That is what I'm talking about, that collection. And yes, it does manifest as pompous, I'm greater than you. You know, it does manifest. Somebody said too, the ego is your belief that you are separate from others. Okay? So if you make a judgment of yourself or others, then that is the ego controlling you, telling you that you and them are not one. That is the challenge. That is what happens when you have the Muslims and the Christians or whoever killing each other overseas, the holy wars, people killing in the name, because they're saying, their mind is saying, I'm right and they're wrong. In that thought, I'm not saying who's right or wrong. I'm saying that thought puts you separate from the other person. So to perceive ourselves as separate from the other person creates turmoil inside of us, because if there's separateness,
That's right.
then there's aggressors and there's victims, right? So to perceive ourselves as separate, and that's what Jesus called sin, I believe, to miss the mark, to perceive yourself. So I believe that it all boils down to one thing. If we perceive ourselves as separate from God, that is the source of all of our problems. My thought. And that's kind of lofty, right? That's like, you think about it and you go, well, okay. So that's what I'm talking about today, is to say, how do we get to that point? Has anybody ever watched Eckhart Tolle talk? The guy is just like in a state of bliss. He just talks and he just starts laughing. He says, oh, I got in a car accident today. He's just so happy and he's so present because he has been able to stop that mind chatter. And others have too, the swamis and things like that. And so that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about today. So let me just look at my notes. The Capricorn is coming out again. Okay, so I want to read another A Course in Miracles, another one of my favorites. This is number 70, and it's titled, My Salvation Comes From Me. And the wording is a little bit goofy in this one, but to get the idea across. All temptation is nothing more than some form of the basic temptation not to believe in the idea for today. Salvation seems to come from anywhere else except from you. So, too, does the source of guilt. In other words, salvation seems to come from outside of you. We have to find a guru. We have to find Jesus has to come back to show us the way. But likewise, guilt is outside of you. They're guilty, not me. You see neither guilt nor salvation as in your own mind and nowhere else. In other words, you don't see guilt and salvation inside yourself. You see it outside of yourself. So when you realize that all guilt is solely an invention of your mind, you will realize that guilt and salvation must be in the same place, in your heart, in your body, inside. In understanding this, you are saved. So the seeming cost of accepting today's idea is this. It means that nothing outside yourself can save you. Nothing outside yourself can give you peace. But it also means that nothing outside yourself can hurt you or disturb your peace or upset you in any way. So today's idea places you in charge of the universe where you belong because of what you are. This is not a role that can be partially accepted, and you must surely begin to see that accepting it is salvation. So it goes on a little bit more. Today, I recognize where my salvation is. It is in me because its source is there. It has not left its source, and so it cannot have left my mind. I will not look for it outside of myself. It is not found outside and then brought in, but from within me, it will reach beyond, and everything I see will but reflect the light that shines in me and in itself. No matter how hard you look, you will never find peace in any form, in anything physical or anything outside yourself. Okay, so let's, I probably could have done this at the beginning, but so here's some ideas to help you identify the ego, okay? So again, think about the problem that we were working on or the issue. The ego tells you that your answers will come from something greater than you and outside of you. So do you believe that there's some greater source that's from outside of you that's going to come and save you or going to help you? The ego is going to make life difficult. You know, I really think it consumes a lot more energy to live in the ego and that shatter mind. Spirit is easy. So in other words, is your life easy? Is your life flowing? Or is your life difficult with a lot of challenges and a lot of mind chatter? Ego tells you that your answers will come from something greater than you and outside of you. Ego, well, I already said this. Ego consumes a lot of energy. Spirit invigorates. In other words, if you're in your ego, you're consuming energy and getting tired. If you're in spirit, if you're in that point, that silent observer point, you will be invigorated. You know, we see this like Amma, you know, the hugging guru from India. You know, she will come to an event and she will sit there and hug people for 2 days straight without a break. You know, she won't sleep. She might stop and eat or go to the bathroom or something, but she will continue on for 2 days because she's so full of spirit that she's so energized. Ego uses fear to trick and control. In other words, you know, if you're trying to solve all your problems, you know, that's a trick of ego in itself to say, oh, I got to solve this problem before I can be, you know, before I can find my salvation, before I can find my joy. Ego believes that separation is power. In other words, I'm more powerful than you. Ego tricks you into believing that methods will give you power. There's no technique that is going to give you your power, but with taking it within. We believe that ego has power, but it does not. Now, here's another interesting thing. If you are thinking, you are in your ego. If you are speaking, all words come from the ego. You know, another example would be like if you look at the advanced priests in the temples and such, you know, they really don't talk because there's nothing to say, and because they realize in talking it's coming from the ego. The speech is coming from the ego right now. So the ego is not something that you can understand, but you can know it. Okay? So again, the ego is not the problem, as many believe. Identifying with the ego is the problem. Okay, so now we've been talking a little bit about, you know, more about defining the ego and stuff. So before we go into some methods on how to step back out of that, does anybody else want to say anything at this point or any other thoughts?
I guess this is part of part of the answer, but for me, it's like identifying with the body. I am this body named Lori. I have a name, I have past, I have a history, I have supposedly a future. And that's the identification with this personhood that keeps me separate. That keeps me separate from all others, from the oneness that we really are. So yeah, for me, it's like recognizing I am not a body.
Yes. Exactly. Perfect. Yes. Others, any thoughts, questions?
One of the things I learned when I was in Lilydale in school that they kept saying over and over again was link, don't think. So when I was learning mediumship, it was about linking, getting the thinking mind out of there. And it just takes practice, and don't ask me how I did it. It just happens. But yeah, I think that's really important.
Good. Very good. Yeah. Michael, were you going to say something? Or?
I was, yeah, I still am. Mr. Ahmed Bey talks about the superconscious mind and getting to the superconscious through meditation. And it's kind of putting the ego aside to get to that state. Do you agree?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It is one way. And as Claudia said, it's another technique that she tried. But is that getting into the superconscious mind, Claudia, when you link but don't think?
I do believe it is, because as I practiced and learned mediumship, when I go in that space and I'm bringing someone a message, I don't have any thoughts of materialistic things. It's just about serving them and bringing a clear message through. So, yeah, I do think so.
Of course, this brings up a question as far as these methods that help you connect to the divine to get yourself out of the ego. And connecting to the divine does allow more of that divine power to flow through you into your life. But then you mentioned previously there's no method that can give you more power. So I'm kind of looking at that saying, okay, there's kind of a contradiction in there, at least the way I see it.
And exactly. And that's why each of us has to go there in our own way. So like they say, the Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao. The Tao that can be written is not the Tao. So when you come to that place, it's, well, okay, another way to look at it is you use the methods to get to a certain point, and then you have to just jump over the cliff and trust that you're going to fly, right? You have to throw all the methods out. And you know, that's a big thing in the Hindu teachings too. You know, they say that, you know, and supposedly in the life of Jesus, you know, that they even had to give up love, you know, so that you're giving up all of your attachments to the world. That's another way of looking at it. I look at it like your addictions or your attachments. Am I attached? Am I polarized in the politics of the day? In other words, am I attached to the politics of the day? Now, I'm not saying it's not good to do one thing or the other, but I'm saying, am I attached to what I'm doing, right? Am I obsessed by it? Does it cause turmoil in me? You know, and I love the saying, it says, when we die, we go to the astral plane, and we soar in the astral plane until the weight of our desires brings us back down into another body. So what are our desires? In other words, what are our addictions? And it's not only an addiction to cigarettes or an addiction to alcohol. It's an addiction to money. It's an addiction to, you know, politics. It's an addiction to life. It's an addiction, any power, yeah, anything. And so it's basically, I think, it's identifying with the ego, you know. And so like when you look at, you know, the way hypnosis works, hypnosis or any type of healing, I think, is looking at a situation from a different point of view, right? So if you're down here in the lower things of pain, blame, oh, that guy's such an idiot, you know, blah, 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 you're never going to be healed of that attachment until you can rise up here to say, to look at that situation from this point of view, and then you see it from a different point of view, right? You can, any situation could be looked at from 39 different views or infinite different views, and everybody on this call and everybody in the planet looks at the world differently, right? So who's right? I'm not right. You know, if you look at laws, every law that is in place today at some time has not been a law, right? So who's to say one law is right or the other? I mean, there used to be laws that you could kill your wife if you wanted, and that was okay. You know, is that the right law? There's laws in Las Vegas that you can do prostitution. Is that bad? I mean, so all of these things, I'm not saying one is good or one is not. I'm saying that these are laws. These are man-made laws, you know, that that are there. So our goal is to separate from being attached to these things. And we do that by reassociating with ourself. You know, like Claudia said, I go outside and I work with the dirt. When I'm outside, I can find that innocence. It's to find that innocence within, I believe. And then I do have some techniques, by the way, but even with these techniques, you want to let them go. At some point, you need to let them go. But I think they do help you to get there, if that makes sense.
So in other words, the techniques you're talking about are like training wheels. You use them just long enough until you can go without them.
Oh, I love it. Perfect. Exactly. And at some point you have to take them off and ride the bike. That's a good one. I like it. Thank you. Okay. So, just talk a little bit about it. First of all, transcending the ego is not like a race, or it's not a competition. It's not you did right, you did wrong. There's no end point, and it is infinite. And it's a journey. So part of it is enjoying the journey. There's a fun little story I like about the master is walking along, and he comes upon this celibate priest that's in the cave eating a bowl of rice every day. And he says, Master, how many more lifetimes do I have until I reach enlightenment? And the master says, my son, you have 10 more lifetimes before you realize enlightenment. And the guy goes, oh, shit. Excuse me. 10 more lifetimes of sitting in a cave eating rice? Oh, this sucks. Oh, my God. When is this ever going to happen? And then master walks along a little further, and there's the fool playing in the river, splashing with his dog, having a grand old time. And he says to the master, how many more lifetimes do I have until I realize enlightenment? And the master says, my son, you will have 10 more lifetimes before you realize enlightenment. And the fool is like, 10 more lifetimes? That's outstanding. I love it here. I can't wait. And poof, enlightenment. So the point is, when you can look at life with total joy and total disconnectedness, is when you reach that enlightenment. And so it's up to us, each one of us, to find our own joy. What is that? Whatever it is. If everything in your life is not happy, then you need to do something different. Try something different. What is insanity? But beating your head on the wall and hoping that it's not going to hurt after a while, but it still does. So you have to stop beating your head and do something different. So anyway, so the other part about it is like I love what Ram Dass says. He says, he had anger issues. He had a very big temper and everything. And when he would get angry, suddenly he would see his guru sitting there, he said, in drag. And he'd start laughing and he'd go, oh, you got me again, because that's what Spirit does. If you have anger issues, Spirit's going to try to bring you into anger. So when you fall into that place where you fall back into the ego again, take a deep breath and just laugh and just go, oh, you got me again. Good, Spirit. Thank you, Spirit. But I'm getting better every day. And next time it's going to be good. So a couple of things which are really interesting is, first of all, is to be aware and sense your body. So in other words, there's meditations where you go through and you feel your feet and you feel your legs and you feel your body. And, so you want to feel your body, you want to be in your body. Because where do we go when we get panic or when we stay in the mind? We go right into our head, boop, and we're all up here in our head and we're not thinking, we're not aware of our body. The second thing is to listen to the silence. So in other words, not to listen to my words, but to listen to the silent spaces between my words. And even if you're listening to loud punk rock, there's still silence in that music that you can hear. You can still access the Zen or that place from the silence. When we do the bells, if you listen to them, as the sound fades away, it will carry you into the silence and your mind will stop. And you'll have that emptiness and that joy. And the third thing, if you can't do any of that, is to just try to accept what is. To say, okay, I accept this. I can't get over it. I can't get into silence. I can't sense my body. But can you accept? Can you accept what is? And then if you can't accept what is, you're just like, I just can't accept it. That guy's an idiot. Our president's an idiot, and I can't accept what he's doing. I cannot accept what he's doing. Then in that case, just be with it and hold it. But if you can love it or give it presence, to give those feelings, to realize, it's inside of you. I feel that our current president is bringing up all the daddy issues in us because he's the daddy figure of the country. So he's going to push every button that you have, And so think of it that way. Don't look at it like, oh, I'm pissed off again. Just see if you can say, hey, this is coming, my feelings are coming from inside of me, and can I hold it? Because heaven is right here, right now, inside of us.
Pissed at Trump because he's such a jerk.
What? There's something to work on.
Yeah, right.
She was agreeing with you, Steve.
I got to work on this ego here.
Yeah.
It's something to work on. But realize that it all comes from within. The feelings come from within. And I'm not saying not to do something or to vote a different way or to do it. I'm saying don't engage in it. You can still what you want to do, but don't let it take your power away. Don't let it control you. So anyway, just kind of to summarize the whole thing, I've probably gone way too far, talk too much. I always do. The ego is not the problem. Identifying with the ego is the problem. Every thought that you have is meaningless. It really is. That silence of divinity, that silence of the universe is where what really matters. Don't try to solve every problem in your life. My grievances hide the light of the world in me. Your salvation comes within, from within. Be with your body. Be with the silence. Accept what is. Realize that you have everything inside of you, what you need already. And just be what you are. And so in closing, I'd like to make a statement that I really love. It was said by Maharishi, Indian guru. When you can look in the mirror, cleansed of all anger, you will see God. When you can look in the mirror, cleansed of all anger, you will see God. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any thoughts, questions, ideas, discussions?
It's a lot to work on.
We'll go to work.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a never-ending thing. And I think then when we leave this body and ascend out of this body, then we still got to do more work than ascend out of that body and keep on going and keep on going. So I kind of believe that, in order to experience this, that God fragmented the divine oneness, fragmented into two, and then that two fragmented into 3 and 4, and it's just this hierarchy of fragmentation down into our bodies. So in that way, we are all a part of God. And so to realize that oneness, that all we are is just a fragmented part of God, like rays of the sun. The ray of the sun is not separate from the sun. It's still part of the sun. And we all have that within us. That light of the sun is within us. And our grievances are blocking it. Our grievances are blocking us from experiencing that light and everything that's within it. So.
Yes, it's like the holographic universe concept, Steve, right?
Yeah, exactly. So good. Well, thank you for listening. Hopefully somebody got something out of it.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yes. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.